Greetings to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This is Pastor Peter J. Peters, and the message you're about to hear was presented at our first annual minister seminar, which addressed the subject of who is true Israel and who is not. The entire seminar was recorded and is available from Scriptures for America in a 12-cassette tape album along with printed literature. The singing you're going to hear is that of the participants themselves.
It is time for Scriptures for America Worldwide with Pastor Peter J. Peters. All around the world, from the United States to Canada, Europe, Russia, South Africa, Australia, the Holy Spirit is stirring the hearts of godly Christians. The Bible says, quote, as an eagle stirreth up his nest, end quote. We invite you to stay tuned as Pastor Peter J. Peters shines the mighty light of the gospel on the source of our problems and the only solution. Please keep Scriptures for America in your prayers. And now, our program.
Pastor Jones is a pastor from New Mexico. He puts out a very fine Christian intelligence newsletter. He lectures all over the United States. Pastor Jones, will you stand up? From New Mexico.
I'm Pastor Earl Jones. I'm from New Mexico. I'm one of the infamous 5 or 10 that's on Morris D's list, and I'm very grateful for that, really, in a sense, because that means that I'm doing something. And so I'm glad to be here, and I'm very proud to speak to this group that most of you undoubtedly know more about the Bible and what you were taught in seminaries than I ever would have. But I have some information that I can bring to you I think that will be of value to you. This afternoon, I want to approach this from a historical and a commercial manner. Show politically, historically, and commercially, monetarily, what has happened to these people that we have called Khazars throughout the seminar so far. I'd like to read to you a portion in chapter 5 of a statement that Isaiah made that I think is pertinent to what has been taught so far. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Isaiah prophesied a situation that was to take place, and also John talked about it in Revelations 3. But this morning, Brother Bridgman very aptly pointed out that these people who were Japhetic in origin claimed that we, through their dupe, C.I. Scofield, that we were the ones who will have been Japhetic, and they were in fact the ones who were the true sons of Shem. Well, now, this is in keeping with what Isaiah stated there in verse 20 of chapter 5. He said that woe be unto those who call good, evil, and evil, good. This all came about as a methodology many, many years ago in modern times, and one of the individuals who utilized this techniques was this Cyrus I. Scofield that Brother Bridgman discussed. He changed, switched definitions. It's a trick that's been done many, many times. In 1928, a man by the name of Walter Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And so we're keeping this now, you understand, in the family kinship here in this discussion with respect to how this all fits together. Walter Bernays wrote the book Propaganda, and he's considered the modern-day spin doctor of doing what Isaiah said was going to be done. And that was applied in many, many times in our history in modern time. C.I. Scofield applied it. And as far as I personally am concerned, C.I. Scofield will be one of those who, when Christ said, you seek far and wide to make one proselyte, and you make him twice the child of hell. Remember, our people just like you and me, among our people, are among those who are doing the most damage to Christianity, to Christ, his purpose for being here, and we are unintentionally doing it in Judeo-Christianity, but that is why we're here, to try to correct some of these very grave mistakes, to show how they have done it to us. The famous poet Rudyard Kipling, he once said this, "The East is East, and the West is West, and never the twain shall meet." Now, Rudyard Kipling knew his identity. He knew who he was, as did many of those people in those days. Our forefathers knew who they were. And it is the case with almost all of Kipling's works. There is a very deep meaning in those words that he said in that poem. We must take notice of what he did say and consider that for the discussion this afternoon. I have a book here in my hand that's called The Pre-Adamites. Now, I know that most of you hadn't heard of this book. There has been a great spin doctoring taking place all around us, and we don't even know it. We don't even recognize it as such. 100 years ago, this book was common knowledge among our colleges, among our professors, among our people. It was taught in our schools. It's called The Pre-Adamites, and yet we don't even know the title exists. There's been great book burnings in this country. The book burnings don't have to be where you just have an orgy out here where it's a lot of big pile of books and you throw gasoline on them and you burn the books. All you need to do is just don't print them. Take them off the shelves. Have a reduction in the number of books in the school libraries. When it comes time to have a book printed that is controversial or politically incorrect in any way, just refuse to print it. Take the 10 Commandments off the wall is a form of book burning. Refusing to be allowed to pray before you go to school, take your classes in the morning in school, it's a form of book burning. So we've had a great book burning in the land today. Another book that has had, in a sense, a great book burning is this book that we're going to speak about today, Arthur Koestler and the 13th Tribe. Who were these people historically? That book, too, is a politically incorrect book. Very difficult to find. Many other documents and books I have available in this regard. Why is it politically incorrect to discuss even the title of the book Pre-Adamites? It is all a part of a bigger phenomena around and controlled by those people who call themselves Khazarians in Russia. Today I would like to talk about those Khazars. Who are they? Where did they come from? I dare say that 95% of our people have never heard of the word Khazar. Their very existence has been removed from modern history books, and therefore our students do not learn of them. Yet, these people called the Khazars have so deeply modified our systems of government, our system of commerce, that the whole world, all over the world, follow the system of commerce and the systems of government that they have created out of their Talmud. I have another book with me by a Rabbi Boxer called The Wisdom of the Talmud, in which he very openly states that almost every modern nation of the world follow the precepts of the Talmud in their concept of government. The United States of America is no exception. The last detailed description of the Khazars can be found in the 1911 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Before you go looking for it, there has been a great book burning. That edition also is extremely hard to find. If you will recall, perhaps you don't even know, in 1918, the purchase of the owners of the Encyclopedia Britannica changed hands, as did many other documents in the land in which we live and in England. Another example, in 1907, 1908, there was a earlier attempt at a revolution in Russia. It failed. The April edition of the National Geographic had a very detailed article on that failed attempt of that Russian Revolution in 1907, in which it stated that it was these Khazars, the Ashkenazis of Russia, that created it. Isn't it strange that the National Geographic was also bought up in that period of time, immediately following that issue? That was well, I correct that. It was bought up around 1918, 1919, about the same time as the purchase of the Encyclopedia Britannica. So again, that is a form of book burning today. But this description given in the Encyclopedia Britannica 1911 edition, it shows that according to the Khazarian king Joseph, the Khazars sprang from Togarmah, which of course is the grandson of Japheth through Gomer. And here is this switch that Brother Brueggemann spoke about this morning. It's of course found in Genesis 10. The brother of Togarmah, if you'll recall, was Ashkenaz. That was the brother of Togarmah, and this name also is extremely important in our study today. The Khazar king at that time, or in that period of time, he was named Joseph. He said this about the genealogy of his people. And we find this in the 1911 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. We have found in the family registers of our fathers that Togarmah had 10 sons, and the names of their offspring are as follows. Uigur, it's U-I-G-U-R, Dersu, Avars, Huns, keep that in mind now, Huns, Basili, Tarniak, Khazars, Zagora, Bulgars, and Saber. We are the sons of Khazar the seventh. Now recall, also in that list of 10 was a group called the Huns. Note also that we had in there the Bulgars and the Avars, which also figure prominently in the history of southern Russia following the time of Christ. Now, here is another paradox that we have to take into account. These people and their physical characteristics. There are two portions within the tribe of Khazars that are important. Two terms, two groups of people, all within the Khazar tribe, the empire. The first are called the Khazars, A-K-K-H-A-Z-A-R-S, Khazars, and they were fair-skinned, they were blue-eyed, they were tall, they had reddish hair, they were handsome, and they are of good stature. Now keep that in mind. It's very important as we study and as you think about now the people that you deal with that admittedly are Ashkenazis. Think about what I just said. Khazars. The others were the Kara Khazars, who were dark-skinned, they were short, and they were unattractive. Keep that in mind as you think in terms of these people. So you're saying, oh my gosh, he looks just like us. You're right. He looks just like us because he's of Japheth. Kara Khazars. K-A-R-A Khazars. Now obviously down through the ages, these two peoples intermixed. That would be natural. They were of the same empire. But there will be exceptions to that rule, and that also is important. What I'm describing here about these two peoples in one empire is very important to us. The Khazar Empire was situated directly in the path of the spice routes, the trade routes to the Orient. The caravan overland trade routes from Western Europe going into Eastern Europe and on into the Mongolian and the China region in order to bring back spices and other exotic silks and stuff like this nature brought back to the West as a trade. So what they had done was their great technique for making money was to extract toll on these caravan routes, and it was a very high toll. And so already you had a system in their minds, down in their hearts, as to how they believe things should be. If we can devise systems here to where you can tax them to give them a privilege to do something, to travel over your land or whatever it may be, that would be in keeping with their thought process. And we see that all over around us today. This concept of taxing you to do something, to enable you to do something, is as old as the Khazars on the steppes of Russia. The Mongolian people of the east of Khazaria provided also another input to the bloodline of the Khazars. If you recall, and see, remember now, I just pointed out it was one of the brothers of Khazar. It was Attila the Hun, if you remember your history, and his horsemen from Mongolia, who used the Khazarian Empire as a stepping stone in his march to the west. He went through his brother's property, and he didn't receive much flack there, because they were brothers. And from there, he moved on west. And if you also recall your history, that Attila would have totally decimated Europe and the entire Christian way of life if it had not been for a Christian man by the name of Aetius. 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 He was a Christian general. He was born of a German family and of a Roman nobility mother. And it was Aetius who destroyed Attila on the Catalonian fields in France in 432 A.D. So we're already brushed up with these people. We brushed against these people in France in 432. They had earlier decimated much of Europe. They had gone through and wrung it dry. These people were marvelous horsemen. They were smart. I have books on how Attila thought, what he taught, and it was very similar to what Sun Tzu taught in the art of war. He knew how to do it. He could make use of it. This also is very important. In the process of time, the Khazars were so powerful as a nation that they were able to mix with the Byzantine Empire. And they even provided that empire with one of their kings. It was a King Leo. They provided a large part of the fighting forces for the Byzantine Empire in its efforts to hold back the Muslims on the Muslims' eastern front. If you'll recall, the Muslims were moving eastward into that empire to take it over, and they were moving westward and north into the Western People's Empire in Europe, into Western Europe, to take it over. During that period of time also, there were women who were strikingly beautiful. The Khazars were strikingly beautiful women. They provided many wives for the Eastern Roman Empire at Constantinople. They were known at the time as the Byzantines, but it was at Constantinople. I gave, in one of my recent intelligence newsletters, I titled it, Why Are We in Bosnia? And in that newsletter, I gave a rather comprehensive history of these people and how they interrelated with all of the old Byzantine Empire, which of course you see was the Eastern Roman Empire. And if you'll recall also, the Eastern Roman Empire took over from the Holy Roman Empire when the Holy Roman Empire went down in the so-called Dark Ages. The Eastern Roman Empire, called the Orthodox Roman Empire, they were very powerful. And then it became known as the Byzantines. Well, these Khazars worked very close to this. This is going to prove very important in our study. The Khazar kingdom, until the 8th century, which will be in the 700s, was pagan in their religion. Their basic theology was phallic worship, and they also had the system, I can't recall the name of it at the moment, where you could make things right and you could pass judgment and change things by the occult system. You could wave your wands and do this occultic gibberish and have things happen, and they considered it almost as a god to them. But their basic concept was that of phallic religion. But the Khazar king at the time was named Bulan, and he was determined to convert his king into an established religion. He had to have an established religion to do what the Khazars were bent on doing. He had to decide between Christianity, Mohammedanism or Muslims, or Judaism, Talmudic Judaism. Now, because of his relationships with the Muslims during the war with the Arabs, and the Christians in his relationships with them at Constantinople, he realized that he had a problem. Now remember, King Bulan was an intelligent man, a very intelligent man. If he chose Christianity, the Muslims would attack him. If he chose the Muslims, the Christians would attack him. So what did he do? He chose the Talmudic Jewish faith. He also realized, being the clever gentleman that he was, that it would be of great economic value to him and his people if he chose Talmudic Jewry. And we shall see that as the lesson continues. From that early start, we see what has culminated in political Zionism. Now, am I speaking anti-Semitism? No. Am I being racist? Perhaps. But in whose eyes? Am I not allowed to discuss history? Yes. Political Zionism is a political term. It so happens that there are more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists. Therein is a problem. How can that be? Without men like Cyrus I. Schofield. So we've got a lot of unwinding to do. We must recognize that God is in command. He's in command of this world, not some other entity that we may want to call the devil. In Isaiah 5, that very well-written document that Isaiah put out in God's name, starting in verse 5, we read this: I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. I girdeth thee, though thou hast not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is nothing beside me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. There's a second witness to that in the book of Amos, chapter 3 and verse 6. Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Shall there be evil in a city, and the Lord hath not done it? This lesson about the Khazars is a very large part of the prophecies of the Bible. I'm only able to give you a short overview of it. I just pray that you go from here, take what I am saying as a key to start reading about these people. Arthur Khazar, in his book, The 13th Tribe, is a very famous Jewish author, very well qualified. He's written many books, very intelligent gentleman. He was known for his research and all of his documentation. His book, The 13th Tribe, is a history of the Khazars, which was written with substantiated research material. It is said that Arthur Khazar and his wife, they were assassinated. They were killed in a hotel in Paris, France. It was obvious that they were assassinated. It is said that they were assassinated for him writing this book, The 13th Tribe. True or not, I don't know. Matter of conjecture. He starts his study with the Khazars with this statement. The general picture that emerges from these fragmentary pieces of information is that of a migration of Khazar tribes and communities into those regions of Eastern Europe, namely Russia and Poland, where at the dawn of the modern age, the greatest concentration of Jews were found. This has led several historians to conjecture that a substantial part, and perhaps the majority of Eastern Jews, and hence of world Jewry, might be of Khazar and not of Shemitic origin. That's important. That was pointed out this morning. That better than as much as, if not more than, 95% of all of those who are of the Talmudic faith are of Ashkenazi Khazar origin. Then Arthur Khazar says this: the study of the Khazar Empire, as it slowly emerges from the past, begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. Important. Yes, it was a hoax created by them, but with God in command. God, in all of his infinite wisdom, has put together a people so most uniquely suited to teach his people Israel a lesson. You and I are under judgment. We're deep in judgment as a people because we as a people have failed our God. We didn't even conduct the first part of our mission for even being here, let alone the rest of it. We have failed him, and we're under judgment. And God put together a most extraordinarily talented people for a purpose. Remember this. I am no ways putting these people down as mud people. The Khazars, later to be known as the Ashkenazi Jew, started their long road to commercial eminence after the fall of Muslim power in the 8th century. That Muslim power in the 8th century was again decimated by our people. If you remember, it was Charles Martel, the Alemannish Frankish warrior who defeated the Muslim Arabs in 732 AD. And strangely enough, It was again on the Catalonian fields along the Rhone River where that destruction took place. The Muslims' back was broken on its western march. The Khazars did it on their eastern march. But nevertheless, Christianity would not be known today in the world if it wasn't for Charles Martel doing God's work. But nevertheless, Christianity would not be known today in the world if it wasn't for Charles Martel doing God's work. We must look at this in the same way. We need Charles Martels. We need Adiuses. We need Gideons. The 1911 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica states this about the Khazars during the period starting with the 9th century. This is 800 AD, in the 800s. In the interval between the decline of the Mohammedan Empire and the rise of Russia, the Khazars reached the zenith of their power. That is, as it was understood at the time. They've reached a much higher zenith. The merchants of Byzantium, Armenia, and Baghdad met in the markets of Italy and traded for the wax, furs, leather, and honey that came down the Volga. So important was this traffic held at Constantinople that when the portage to the Don was endangered by the eruption of the fresh hordes of Turks, the Emperor Theophilus himself dispatched the materials and the workmen to build for the Khazars. Now I want you to think in modern terms now. Think about what's going on around you right today. He dispatched the materials and the workmen to build for the Khazars a fortress impregnable to their forays. Merchants from every nation found protection and good faith in the Khazar cities. The Jews expelled from Constantinople sought a home amongst them, developed the Khazar trade, and contended with Mohammedans and Christians for the theological allegiance of the pagan people. At the Byzantine court, the Khakan, Khakan, was held in high honor. The Emperor Justinian took refuge with him during his exile and married his daughter. The Khazar king, which is called a Khakan, was honored in diplomatic intercourse with the seal of 3 solidi, whatever a solidi means, which marked him as a potentate of the first rank, above even the Pope and the Carolingian monarchs. This is power, friends. Indeed, his dominion became an object of uneasiness to the jealous statecraft of Byzantium. Nothing new under the sun. All of this was a result of their prowess in commercial ventures. This was a start of their climb up that long road the Apostle John wrote about in his book of Revelations. John termed that prowess Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon is a commercial entity. John wrote in chapter 3:9, "Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie." John was saying the same thing as Isaiah said in verse 20 of chapter 5. Those who make evil good and good evil. After the ruse from the Scandinavian countries went into Russia and united the separate Slavic bands, the Khazar kingdom was destroyed, never again to be recognized in the average history book. As a nation of Japhetic, Turkish, Mongol crosses, they were driven from the pinnacle of power and commercial success by the people now known as the Russians. In my mind, it was this fact of history that is probably the reason for the enmity natural enmity that exists between the Russian people and the Ashkenazi Jews. That fact of history. After the pagan Khazar Ashkenazis were converted to Judaism, there was a spirited exchange between them and the Sephardics, or the Spanish Jews, and that was discussed this morning, so I won't go into that much. They were of the Middle East and of Spain, but they play a part in this, a big part of this. Sephardic rabbis taught these people the Talmud, which they in turn learned while in Babylon. If you recall, the Sephardics, of course, were those that were in Babylon and came out under Nehemiah and Ezra, and then mixed with many of them mixed with the people, and then moved on up into Spain. And of course, it was discussed about Oliver Cromwell in 1640, and I too have done considerable work in this area, and that was an unholy time in the history of our people. During this period of time, there was also a very free exchange between the Sephardic, the Ashkenazi, and the Edomites, and that too was carried this morning, and I think it'll be covered some more. A strange admixture of ideas, theology, and system of government came as a result of that relationship between the three groups. The Khazar Ashkenazis were taught the additional intricate points of commerce and money by the Sephardics, where they had learned it in Babylon. The Sephardics were taught a new purpose for the Talmudic concept by the Ashkenazis. The Edomites ignited the age-old enmity between Jacob and Esau. And we must never underestimate the importance of what that unholy trinity performed and conducted, the onslaught against our people. This new direction of thought can best be summarized by what Baruch Levi wrote in 1928. The Jewish people as a whole will be its own Messiah. It will attain world dominion by the dissolution of other races, by the abolition of frontiers, the annihilation of monarchy, and by the establishment of a world republic in which the Jews will everywhere exercise the privilege of citizenship. In this new world order, the children of Israel will furnish all the leaders without encountering opposition. Think about modern times now. The governments of the different peoples forming the world republic will fall without difficulty into the hands of the Jews. It will then be possible for the Jewish rulers to abolish private property and everywhere to make use of the resources of the state. Thus will the promise of the Talmud be fulfilled, in which it is said that when the Messianic time is come, the Jews will have all the property of the whole world in their hands. And my friends, they've already accomplished it. I don't have with me another book by Michael Higger called The Jewish Utopia. I have it written in the room. One of our people, an intelligence officer, the name of Robert Williams, did an excerpt on it, and he talked about this very thing that Baruch Levi wrote, and he brought it up to date. And of course, Higger said the same thing. He talked about how this new world order was to be put in place. Now, he was a professor down at University of Austin. Modern Mystery Babylon, of course, began in earnest in England after 1066, when William the Conqueror invaded England. He took with him his Jewish advisors and his moneylenders from Rome, France. These will have been Sephardics, already mixed with Ashkenazi, and had their thoughts imbued by the more aggressive Khazars. Now remember, there was a free exchange between these Ashkenazis and the Sephardics. Prior to William's invasion of England in 1066, Saxon England owned their property in a allodial title. I have talked about this many times, where they paid no taxes. There were no extensive public works projects, for pretentious government buildings and other massive requirements for taxes. After William the Conqueror, the English went into the system of fief, where property was only owned if you paid the taxes on it. You now are in fief. You do not own your property in allodial. You own it in fief. Just don't pay your taxes for 3 years to see what happens to it. Direct intervention in the lives, the personal lives of the people of England by this big government that was at the behest and at the leadership of these moneylenders from Rome, France, began in an earnest way in that period. It's exactly the same as it is today. The 1 square mile area within the city of London, called the City, was started by the advisors of William the Conqueror. Within that area of London, the present-day system of international commerce and finances began. It was done after William the Conqueror. The English people revolted, and they forced the Magna Carta on King John, who was the grandson of William the Conqueror. When you read the Magna Carta, if you read it very carefully, you can read in there why they even demanded that the Magna Carta be written. It was because of this advice, the control that was being given to them by these outside people. But it didn't change. You could write a Magna Carta right in the United States right today, and it wouldn't change. You could have a 10th Amendment resolution by Charles Duke, and it in itself wouldn't change. You could have community rule, county rule ordinances all you want, but nothing is going to change until a much bigger event takes place. And that bigger event is all of us getting right by God and acting like the Christians He assigned us to act like. Nothing changed. Finally, in 1290, the English people forced Edward I to expel the Jews from England. That didn't start it. That didn't end it. But even then, nothing really changed because our people learned the ungodly systems so readily. You could have a Magna Carta right now. You could say that is going to happen, King John, and our people, just like you and me, won't let it happen because we like it. They liked it in Babylon, too. It was really, truly a beautiful city, one of the 7 wonders of the world. They had everything, just like today. Nothing would happen right today until we get right with God. $1650 was discussed this morning. Oliver Cromwell needed money to pursue his wars with Ireland and Scotland, which are still being conducted. You got the IRA today because the war is still going on. Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel made a covenant with Cromwell where Jewish money and English nobility would together rule the world. Using that Talmudic system started in 1066 in England, the British Commonwealth did just that. Rule, Britannia, rule. Britannia rules the waves. They owned the world. The condition became so bad for them that in Europe that they sent a letter dated 13 January 1489 to the Sanhedrin, which was in Constantinople. Isn't it interesting? It was Constantinople, which described their plight. Now, the leadership of the Sanhedrin, the prince of the Jews, was in Constantinople. Who controlled Constantinople? The Ashkenazis. The letter that came back was written, that letter to them was written by Shamor, rabbi of Arles in Provence, France. And coming back some few years later in 1489, over the signature of VSS, VFF, Prince of the Jews, He advised the Jews of Europe to adopt the tactics of the Roman horse, to make their sons Christian priests, lawyers, doctors, and so forth, and work to destroy the Christian structure from within. They did just that. Returning to the Eastern Front now, so to speak, the Ashkenazis moved into Poland, Italy, Austria, and particularly Germany because of the destruction of their homeland by the Russians. They moved out, all a part of a greater plan. There were many Ashkenazi families who became extremely powerful in all of the disciplines mentioned by the Prince of the Jews. This happened in the United States of America. I talked about the great immigration that took place here between 1870 and 1920, during which time they sent their boys to the universities, colleges, and schools to take the robes. They became lawyers, they became judges, they became congressmen, they became senators, they became the Louis Brandeis of the Supreme Court. They took the robes in the United States. All of the immigration laws were changed following that period of time. Amschel Meyer Bauer, later changed to Rothschild, was foremost in all of the Ashkenazis in this world of commerce. He was born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1743, the son of an Ashkenazi Jew who was a goldsmith in Khazar. Amschel Meyer changed his name from Bauer to Rothschild, which of course means red shield. Communism. Edom is red and communism is red. Amschel Meyer Rothschild married Gutter Schnapper in 1770, and they had 5 sons and 5 daughters. He was educated as a rabbi, Meyer Amschel was, because of the money, and he became the money-lending agent for William IX, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel. The Jewish Encyclopedia says this about the beginning of the Rothschild dynasty. He became the agent of William IX, who on his father's death in 1785 had inherited the largest private fortune in Europe, estimated at $40 million, derived mainly from the hire of troops to the British government for the putting down of the revolution in the United States of America. After the Battle of June 1806, the Landgrave fled to Denmark, leaving $3 million with Meyer Rothschild for safekeeping. He absconded with it. That $3 million was given to Amschel's son Nathan in England, who parlayed it to $7.5 billion. That was the English branch of the dynasty alone. Each of the 5 brothers did as well in the various countries their fathers had assigned them. Here in the United States, at the time of World War II, they owned the New York banks with the possible exception of 2. They controlled the New York Federal Reserve Bank. They owned the insurance companies, the railroads, 70% of the steel industry, 80% of the press, the news, advertising agencies, and 80% of the movie industry. At the time of World War II, they owned over 1/2 of the entire wealth of the United States of America. They likewise owned over 1/2 of the wealth of the entire world. That was at the time of World War II. Since then, that has grossly increased. Cecil Rhodes was an agent of the Rothschilds. Rhodes and the Oppenheimers were able to defraud the Boers out of the diamond mines of South Africa. The Boer War was centered around that conflict. There were 2 distinct lines of lineage within the Rothschild family. In the first line, he had a system that would seem rather strange to you and me, at least a part of it. 1, the eldest son of the eldest son was to be the head and the ruler of the fortune. 2, the intermarriage of cousins was demanded. So much for God's law. 3, the unity of the family fortune and its concealment was accomplished. And lastly, a perpetual family partnership was assured. The second line, and that will be the lineage of the nobility, the kings within the Rothschild family, the kings of Jewry. We don't know the details of that line, but we can rather be certain that in that lineage of the family resides the title of the Prince of the Jews today. Somewhere in the Rothschild family is the modern-day Prince of the Jews of the Sanhedrin. Where it is, I don't know. Is it all important to know? Is it important for you to know this? Yes. I can say unequivocally, yes. It is that money that is funding the incessant attacks against Christianity. The media, the movies, the TV, the organizations such as the ADL, the B'nai B'rith, World Jewish Congress, and yes, the Southern Poverty Law Center, by our dear friend Morris Dees, all comes from that money. And remember, Isaiah 5:20, woe be to those who call evil good and good evil. All you got to do is reverse it and then start demonizing the righteous one while at the same time elevating the evil one, and you've accomplished what Walter Bernays said in his book Propaganda. Governments at all levels bends to the pressure. Our government bends to the pressure. Our president is bending daily to this incessant pressure. New congressmen will come in there saying, I'm just going to wipe the slate clean. I don't care whether I'm here for 4 years or not. I'm getting in here. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to get out. What about those 70 newcomers that just came in? What do you hear about them today? Nothing. They already shot their wad. So they bend to this. All sorts of techniques is put into it. Our congressmen, our senators, the executive branch, all of it bend to it. Victor Ostrovsky, he's an ex-Mossad agent who wrote the book By Way of Deception. How many of you heard that book? Wonderful. How many of you have it? Wonderful. Have you read it? Yeah. Good. Marvelous book, really. Here they're making light of their own evil. They're telling you what they're doing to us.